Okay, we are now live.
Yeah, I'll just give everybody a couple minutes or a couple seconds to log in. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 5th installment of the city's virtual community update series. Tonight's focus will be on the Rochester Police Department. My name is Nick Petiti. I'm the Director of Business Intelligence for the department, and I will be acting as the moderator for tonight's event. I just wanted to start off by thanking you, the community, on behalf of the department for virtually joining us tonight. Although I think we would agree that we would rather be having this conversation face-to-face, we must all remain steadfast in protecting our circles as best we can. Tonight, we plan on introducing our new police chief, Cynthia Harriet Sullivan, and her command staff. The chief will then review the highlights of her 90-day plan. I will provide a brief 2020 crime overview, and the new executive deputy chief will discuss our balanced response for violence reduction. We will reserve time at the end of the presentation for community dialogue. So please use the chat feature to send in any questions you may have. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to Chief Harriet Sullivan.
Thank you, Nick. First, we'll go through the agenda. And, oh, no, I'm sorry. You actually did just do that. I apologize. So next slide, please. Just a little bit about my experience. I've spent just over 25 years in law enforcement. I've got a lot of experience in dealing with criminal justice reform. The position I left to take when I left the department involved addressing issues of disparity in the criminal justice system, an area that's important to me. And I'm someone who's very dedicated to community involvement in any plan we put together. It has to be a collaboration. And I believe that we have to work together to problem solve any issues that involve the community. I do want to take a minute to talk about our structure. As you can see, the chief sits at the top of the organization. I have some direct reports. Those involve like our professional standards section. Some departments call it internal affairs. We also have other areas of critical importance, such as business intelligence and the executive deputy chief, who you're going to hear from in a little while. And also I have a chief of staff that manages the administrative staff in the office. Now, I do want to mention that while on the call, we've got some members of our team that are here. Our deputy chiefs are of the Administration Bureau are Thomas Shaw. Of operations is Gabriel Persons. And you're going to meet and talk to in a little bit our executive deputy chief, Andre Anderson. He's acts in the role of second in command in the police department and coordinates most of our services. So, you know, it's an important role. And so that I had to spend a lot of time, put a lot of thought into the person I selected for that role. I've mentioned our deputy chiefs. I also want to take a minute to acknowledge Mr. Willie Lightfoot, who's our city council vice president, but he's also chair of our criminal justice committee. And just under our deputy chiefs, we have commanders that are also appointed. I want to mention David Smith, who's the commander of patrol, Elena Correa, who's the commander of the administrative bureau, and John Kuhnman, who's commander of the special operations section. And I also mentioned Lieutenant, or the professional standards section. Well, that's run by Lieutenant Swatman. And those are people that are critical to our organization. Next, please. So many of you have heard that I talked about having a 90-day plan when I joined the police department. Well, what's important about that is it's an opportunity to gather my thoughts, to figure out what the areas are that are critical and facing the department, and how I need to really organize my first decisions and changes I would make. It's to set the department on the best path I can moving forward. So 90-day plans aren't written in stone. They're meant to be flexible where needed. But as opposed to just moving forward without any sort of path to address any issues the department faces, this puts things in place for me. There's some structure involved. And it also gives me an opportunity to give a message to staff as to what my expectations are. So that's a win-win, I feel, all around. There are 8 primary goals involved in this plan. And goal 1, if we could go to the next slide, please. And that's to address the current leadership needs of the police department. And it also meant filling critical leadership positions. At the time that I started, RPD was facing some leadership shortages, and those were involving or due to retirements and resignations. Filling those titles was critical. I needed to stabilize the department. Staff needed to know that there was effective leadership in place, and it puts us in a position where if we're going to be there for the community and fill the community's needs and listen to their concerns, we need a full functioning department to be able to do that. As a part of that, I developed a process where I personally vet all candidates for leadership positions, and I want ethical, competent, and diverse staff to fill those spots. And I'm happy to say we're well on our way to doing that. You've met, I've just advised you on who some of our critical top leaders are, and certainly they're up to the challenge. So I just want to personally thank them again for their willingness to step up and put the department and the community first. Next slide, please.
Chief, can I just interrupt you for a second? Can all the panelists please put their volume on mute? I'm getting some kind of feedback. It sounds like some kind of scratching. But if everybody can go on mute, we should be all set. Thanks.
Thank you. Goal 2 is to identify any critical departmental resource needs. That involves getting assessments from department heads to be able to make a determination on what issues their bureaus are facing, as well as resources that are needed. I have gotten reports from the different respective departments advising me as to what projects they're working on, critical resources, areas of concern for them. And so I'm in the process of reviewing those. I'm also doing that in partnership with our executive deputy chief, because we want to take advantage of the knowledge they have. I mean, they've been working quite a bit in these areas that they've reported on. So who best to have the most current information about what areas we need to address. Next, please. So we want to identify top matters that are facing the Rochester Police Department. Many people have seen in the news that there are several pressing matters that involve the Rochester Police Department, that involve lawsuits and investigations by outside agencies. These pending matters have the potential to impact our staff. It has an impact on morale and also on our resources. So My plan is to check the progress of these issues. I need to monitor them. And it gives me an opportunity to stay on top of the pulse of the department. Are we having morale issues? Are there mixed messages going out or misinformation? We need to stay on top of that in order to ensure, again, like I said, that we have a full functioning department. Next, please. Thank you. So we also want to identify and meet with critical business stakeholders to establish collaborative relationships. Now, I'm happy to say that I've met with quite a few people. The great thing about this is there are quite a few people out there that are willing to step up to meet with us, to offer their support and resources so that we can put ourselves in a position, leverage ourselves so that we're able to meet the community needs and address those concerns as best we can. I am in the process of creating an advisory committee of diverse professionals. That's diversity in thought, career, backgrounds in different ways. There's some law enforcement leaders, but I also want business leaders because what we're trying to do is bridge any trust or concerns, and we can't do that by meeting separately. We need to come together in a diverse group and ensure that we come to the table, we're prepared to have discussions about how to best meet the needs of the citizens of the city of Rochester. And that involves building relationships from all segments of the community. So that's ongoing and it will be. And I look forward to sharing with you a full listing of who those people are. Next, please. So for goal 5, we want to review departmental policies and procedures and ensure any needed updates are initiated. I want to have the research and evaluation section work to take a critical look at any measures to ensure our policy and procedures align with our most up-to-date best practices. That's a process that's ongoing. Laws change. We become knowledgeable about more up-to-date information on how to best operate our law enforcement agencies. So we want to be able to stay on top of that. We're going to do that internally, but there may be a point where we're going to have maybe an outside vendor or consultant that's going to come in and assist us with that. So again, we'll keep you posted as we move forward in this process. Next, please. Determining our alignment with the 21st century policing 6 pillars. For some who may not be familiar with that, this is a process, a project that was put in place by the previous President Obama, and it involves 6 pillars that are best practices for law enforcement agencies to follow. And some of those things involve areas such as building trust and legitimacy, officer wellness and safety. So you want to follow those pillars as sort of a benchmark to ensure your police department's on track to be fully functioning and headed in the right direction. So as we look at our processes, you're going to hear from the executive deputy in a little bit. One of those things involves, for example, our violence reduction plan, and he'll talk about how we want to make sure that we involve the community and our partners that are out there, other professionals and other nonprofit groups that we have the same goals and we want to involve them in our work and decision making. That's what that means when we talk about aligning ourselves with those pillars. We want to make sure as we come up with new processes or we have programs or problem solving we put into play, we want to make sure we involve our partners and our stakeholders in those discussions. And then, they may bring some things to the table, some resources that are pretty beneficial that we want to take advantage of. So, but that's what that means, constantly looking at our internals and making sure that we measure ourselves against those pillars and then make improvements where it might be needed. Thank you. Next, please. So we want to gather as much information as possible about the community, and we want to identify what they might need from the Rochester Police Department. That involves meetings, discussions, more meetings and discussions, and then sometimes we need to touch base again to clarify any understandings that we think we may have. So for example, last night we had a meeting with a group of community leaders, and they gave us a lot of valuable input as to what sort of direction we may need to take. And they voiced their concerns on some of the issues or things that they've been dealing with. And so that's a continuous process. I know I talk about doing that in a 1 to 40 day timeline, but that my goal is to meet as many people as possible, to have my staff meet as many people as possible so that we can gather as much data as we can within that timeline. But it's always going to be an ongoing process. So, you know, in many of these areas of the city, you have official leaders and then some unofficial. You know, they've been in the neighborhoods for a bit and everybody knows them. They've got a lot of knowledge. So we want to include everybody in those discussions. And then our goal is to have some established and lasting partnerships that, again, it doesn't end. We want to be vigilant about that and constantly keeping our conversation and communications going so that we're always hearing new information and that we're accessible to people who may need to reach us. Thank you. Next, please. And then finally, we want to establish professional relationships with other law enforcement and officials in the county, as well as public and private entities. So what that means is, at first it's the obvious. It's, you know, we've got different police agencies around Monroe County, our towns, our state police, the sheriff's department. We want to establish those relationships, make sure we touch base with everyone, because we're going to need each other. We're going to work together on different projects, and we want to stay connected. Myself and the executive deputy chief, we did recently attend the Law Enforcement Council, which contains the police chiefs from all the different towns in the area. Chief Phelan of Greece is chairing it. He's the president this year. So it gave us an opportunity to meet everybody, to get connected, give out our business cards, and be clear about how to reach each other and talk about how we can partner on different issues of concern that involve all of us. So we want to stay involved in that. And it's not just law enforcement, that's private security. It's other organizations that have major stakes in the community. They have properties, they have private security forces. You know, we want to talk to all of those groups. And if there are common issues that we can work on together, then we want to have those conversations. And again, it's got to be ongoing, continuous, and we need to be vigilant about that. So next is our crime overview. Thank you to our business intelligence director, Mr. Petiti. He's going to take it from here. Nick?
Thanks, Chief. I'm going to give a brief overview of the 2020 crime stats to date. As soon as my screen starts cooperating. There we go. Okay, so overall, our Part 1 crimes, those are the Unified Crime Reporting System data that the FBI collects. Those are murders, rapes, robberies, and aggravated assaults. They make up violent crime categories. And burglary, larceny, and motor vehicle theft, which make up the property crime category. Those two types of crime, violent crime and property crime, comprise to make Part 1 crimes up. Those are the official stats collected by the FBI. Our counts for 2020 this year to date are up from 2019 and from our 5-year average. They're up slightly, less than 1%, but still up from 2019. That really masks a relatively large spike in violent crime incidents, particularly in aggravated assaults. Property crime reductions have mostly offset the violent crime in the overall totals because we were down about 10% in larcenies. When we talk about increases in aggravated assaults, it's primarily driven by a steady uptick in shooting victimization, both fatal, meaning murders, and non-fatal, which fall into the aggravated assault category. When you look at it compared to 2019 only, this year has produced a consistent upward trend of shooting victimization. And we've had a few recent high-profile victim events like the mass shooting on Pennsylvania Avenue. We're not oblivious to the fact that these kind of sporadic events really reinforce the huge role that violence plays in our community's well-being, the community's perception of public safety, and then therefore its relationship with RPD. But we do feel it's important to put them in context, not to minimize the events, but to talk about how this is a larger problem that is not unique to just Rochester. Nationally and across New York State, firearm violence has risen sharply in 2020. And if you look at this chart, I know it might be a little hard to read, but essentially what this is it's a comparison of shooting victimization across New York State for the 17 GIVE counties, which is a grant New York State gives out. It's the gun-involved violence elimination grant, and it's money to deal with firearm-related violence in the cities that comprise the most violence outside of New York City. There are 17 jurisdictions. And you can see from this chart, primarily in the percent change from 2019 and the percent changes from the 5-year average, that across the state, jurisdictions are up significantly, almost double what they were at this time in 2019. So it's not a problem that's unique to Rochester. And to be totally honest, it's not, the underlying data shows that the violent crime hasn't really changed in its key elements. What we do know when we talk about firearm-related violent crime is that it clusters both in locations and times. We have relatively small amounts of street segments that disproportionately account for a large volume of our firearm-related crime. Probably not coincidentally, there's also a very small percentage of the community that's responsible for a disproportionate amount of offending. We have a chronic firearm offender problem. It's not to say that this is evenly distributed across time or across individuals, that these are grouped together in both spatial, temporal, and personal offending, which actually makes it important to focus our violent crime reduction plans around clusters of locations and times and people. And with that, I'm really going to turn it over to the Executive Deputy Chief for his discussion on our balanced response to dealing with specifically firearm-related violent crime.
Thank you. So first, I want to start off by saying that I am pleased to be here. And obviously, when I took on this role, I found it very important to work with a very respected leader in Chief Harry Sullivan, one that's committed to the citizens of Rochester and the police department, and one that has everyone's best interests in mind. We spoke very early on about what we thought we wanted to do, and we wanted a world-class police department. She's committed to making a good organization great, and I believe we have the leadership here in place to do this. So my preliminary view of leadership here is to help build a bench, identify key leaders, and get our current and future leaders in place in order to drive the organization. But doing that, our violent crime requires us to take a look at how we strike a balance. And that is, as the chief indicated, utilizing our 21st century policing philosophy. The first pillar is building trust and legitimacy. But yet we have to treat people with dignity and respect, not only the police officers in the department, which is critical, but those in the community as well. And we do that by giving individuals a voice. We're doing that. We're listening. We're going on listening circles, and we're being neutral in decision making. One of the first conversations that we had, and I had with employees, was to talk about the concept of being overly judgmental and taking away that mindset in order for us to bridge gaps in the community. So we want to convey trustworthy motives, not only those trustworthy motives inside the organization, but outside the organization. And certainly extend grace when possible. Next slide. So our long-term violence reduction plan is a collaboration of a community policing plan as well as a violence reduction plan. You need both to work in tandem. And as we build this plan, you'll find that we're working to bring in a neighborhood policing plan that gets the police officers more involved in the communities, working in tandem with those that understand the problems in the community, the business merchants, while also addressing individuals at the core committing crimes. It is a focused approach to individuals that are committing crimes, while also a victim-oriented approach that helps people in the community, grounded on our principles of procedural justice. We want to make sure that we do what we can to deal with early disputes. We want to identify them and create intervention which can reduce and minimize violent crimes. We want to focus our data with respect to looking at firearm hotspot areas and getting our police officers in locations where those crimes are taking place and getting them focused. We want to have a targeted response to high-risk firearm offenders. And again, as we indicated, we want to work with our various partners, whether it be the Center for Dispute Settlement, whether it be many other organizations, Pathway to Peace and others, to do a street outreach. But for the most part, we want to work with our faith-based partners and many other people to implore our neighborhood policing plan. Next slide. So as we look at our immediate response, one of the things that you're going to find is as we move into this era, we're going to empower the captains in the 5 different sections to be leaders in their areas. They'll be the police chief for their particular area, for lack of a better term. We will provide them resources and we will help them. This plan will require us to engage in an immediate strategy. Now, we spoke for some time about developing a plan. Now we are ready, and we have already moved forward with our immediate response. DCO Persons is here, and I would like for him to speak specifically about what we're doing immediately.
Thank you, sir. First off, I just want to say I'm glad to be here and have the opportunity to address and help further the mission of violence reduction. I want to welcome everybody that's tuning in. As far as our immediate response goes, again, like the Executive Deputy Chief had mentioned, it's our plans are going to be focused on different sections of the city. So as each captain acting as a chief, if you will, of their section, they're going to be tailoring their plans and their responses specifically to the problems that are brought forth by our partners, to include the residents of that of those sections, and allow them to tailor those plans to actually address the violence. We know that no 2 sections of the city are alike, and that's why we need to take a tailored, customized, if you will, approach to reducing violence. The captains will be using in their plans a model that we call SARA, which is scanning, analyzing, responding, and assessing. The most important part of this plan and that model is the assessment part. That allows the plan to be fluid, and it allows it to be tailored and looked at again to see what's working and what's not working. This is going to take coordination and cooperation from all of our community partners, and especially input from our citizens.
Thank you. So as we conclude our portion, just know that the captains and the employees will be involved in many different strategies to include increasing foot patrol, traffic, and many other traditional responses. While we've also received training, all of the leaders on transitioning from a traditional policing mindset to a more modern day policing mindset, we plan to use innovation to our advantage. And that will require us to push the leaders in our department to think outside the box. We will be holding them accountable by way of problem-solving meetings and addressing the issues and bringing the community forward to assist. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Nick.
So at this point, I think we're ready for final comments. And Council Member Lightfoot, do you have anything you want to add before we get to the question and answer section? I'm going to take that as a no. So if anybody else has anything for the greater good, now would be the time to pipe up, or we can get right into the community question and answer session. Oh, there's Councilman Lightfoot.
Hello.
Sorry, sir.
Yeah, thank you. No, I'm very excited. And first and foremost, I want to welcome Executive Deputy Chief Andre Anderson to Rochester Brothers. It's a pleasure to have you here. I want to congratulate Cynthia Heller Sullivan for your position as chief, and all of the command staff, Nick Petiti and the rest of you guys, for the wonderful work that you're doing and the great 90-day plan that you put forth. One of the things that I'm looking at that to me is very promising is the fact that you guys are looking to do extensive community engagement. And I think that that is an amazing testament to your leadership. Just recently, I've received emails from captains that are sending out emails around to their neighborhood service centers and to the people that are involved in a lot of the community groups in each individual section. That, to me, I've never seen that happen. At least I haven't, and I think that that is a great approach. I'm sitting down with the Genesee section captain next week, and so I just appreciate the fact that you guys are taking a community-driven approach to working together. And I love the fact that you mentioned treating people with dignity, treating people with respect. And I think as long as we do that and we keep that at the forefront, that we can get to a better place with police and community relations in our city. So I thank you guys for what you're doing. I look forward to continue the partnership going forward. And I look forward to hearing from our community as to their expectations, concerns, and how we can continue to work together as a community. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump right into some of the questions that came in while we were talking. Just as a reminder for anybody following along, if you have a burning question, you can use the chat feature to send it in and we can get it addressed to the panel. So the first one that came through is a question about COVID. With COVID on the rise, is there anything that the police department could do to stop these large gatherings / house parties?
This is Chief Harriet. That's certainly a tough situation we're in. It's difficult to monitor people's behavior while they're in the privacy of their homes. So my feeling is our best approach is to really push what's already been happening from the mayor's office and city hall and our council leaders, is to get people to comply on their own, to get them to understand the seriousness of the situation and what we're dealing with and the burden it's placed on the community when we don't protect ourselves from this sort of illness. We do have internally at the police department our own COVID plan. We're holding ourselves accountable as well. We're no different than the rest of the community. We have to limit our contact. We've got our sanitizing stations up. We're, as much as we love our handshakes and, when we haven't seen our friends in a while, we're keeping that social distance. And we've moved some of our staff meetings to other space so that we are able to accommodate that. So while I could certainly understand your concerns, but we're going to do the best we can. So for example, if somebody reports it to us, we're certainly going to come by, we'll respond and talk to people and address it in the best way we can, the least disruptive way we can, but the best plan is to educate people and to get them to comply on their own, because it's the right thing to do for their families and their friends. Deputy Chief Shaw, who is on this meeting, Zoom meeting, is our COVID person. He's overseeing our response to it, ensuring that we're in compliance. Matter of fact, he had a Zoom meeting earlier today with the mayor's office and city staff. So we're staying on top of this, and we're doing our best to do our role to ensure that the community's safe.
Okay, to follow up on that COVID discussion, another question came in talking about the mayor's announcement today that City Hall will be reducing hours and city staff will be moving to mostly remote working. The question is regarding the police department, and will these new protocols have any impact on RPD?
It will in some ways. It's different for us. We're a little less restricted because obviously we have emergency response responsibilities, but it does in some ways impact our staff where we can, our administrative staff. Deputy Chief Shaw, do you want to weigh in and talk a little bit about our COVID response and our responsibilities?
I don't think it's going to affect calls for service. I mean, we always have officers working, and we always have the ability to bring in officers to make sure that, we're fully staffed as best we can. I mean, there's some services, secondary services that we're going to end up doing without and play catch up later on once hopefully this quiets down a little bit. I think the big picture is that, the city itself is not going to see a reduction in police service or police response time due to this COVID setback.
Great, excellent, thank you.
So apparently COVID's a hot topic tonight. Another question just came in talking about seeing RPD officers knock on doors in their neighborhood with no masks on. Is there a formal requirement that officers wear masks?
Deputy, I'm going to have Deputy Chief Shaw weigh in on it. Again, he's been overseeing our COVID response, so I'm going to let him address it.
So the officers are told that they're supposed to be wearing the masks whenever they're dealing with the public, and we try to follow the CDC guidelines as we could. Again, if the officer comes across a situation where he's unable to put the mask on, whether it's a safety reason or if it's because in haste or something, we understand that. But for the most part, they're supposed to be wearing the mask just like everybody else is, and whenever they're dealing with the public.
Okay, switching gears a little bit, we had a couple questions on community engagement and partnerships. So the first one is looking at community relations. What efforts are in place for the police department to help bridge the gap between the police and the community?
This is a City Herald. I'm going to speak a little bit, and then I'm going to ask our executive deputy chief to weigh in as well. I'm a firm believer in relationships and partnerships and collaborative efforts. That when you build a relationship, you have to be vigilant about it. It's an ongoing process. I don't believe there's a point where you can ever sit back and say, okay, that relationship is working well. I'm going to go off and do something else. This is something that's a constant. If we hope to stay on top of any critical new issues that face the community, we have to talk to each other. And I don't see, or I don't know of a substitute for that works well. Not that I've seen tested, but everything we do is built around that. That we have to work at and problem solve together. As I said when I was sworn in, that anybody who believes that the police department, we're gonna come up with a plan and we're going to present it to the community and say, okay, here we go. That's not going to be how we operate. We're in this together, and we're going to work together, and we're going to work at relationships together. It's not just on us, on the police department, but on the community as well. But ED, do you want to weigh in at all?
Yes, Chief. That's a really good question. And I think one of the things that we know about our chief, and obviously I hope that this is something that our whole command staff, I know, as I call him, Tommy, he's got the greatest smile on the police department. When you look at community engagement, the first thing is about how we engage our employees and having a relationship with them. Well, we can't expect the employees to have positive engagement if we're not treating them with respect. And that's what we're doing. Now it's balanced. There is accountability, but we do care. I know the chief really cares, and DCA Shaw as well as DCO Pearson, they care. We care about our community. We care about our police officers. But specifically, what are we doing? I had an opportunity to go to our neighborhood service centers and meet with our crime prevention officers and talk to them about what they're doing with procedural justice. And they're going back to actually identifying what's key with respect to how we treat the community. And you know what we're doing is we're clipping the wings off them. We just let them go. And we told them to put some things together. They're bringing some plans together. They're going to get out there and they're going to make it happen. And that's what they're going to do. We have a plan that's going to get the police officers more involved in doing things. Okay. The last thing is we're sending a contingency of police officers out there to actually bring the neighborhood policing platform here. It was used in Chicago, was used in Detroit, was used in New York City. And we're going to combine that with many of the great efforts that we have here. So our community engagement efforts are really reemerging. We got great people here, we got great community, and we're putting that plan in place right now as we speak.
Well said.
Okay, piggybacking on the community engagement discussion, there's a pretty specific question coming in about the chief's PCIC group, which I believe stands for Police Citizen Interaction Committee. And the question is, I was once a member of the chief's PCIC group. Do you foresee that group coming back maybe on Zoom because of the COVID-related issues?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, that group actually still meets. We've had some delays due to the COVID situation, but we have established a Zoom format, and so those meetings are taking place. But that's one of our groups, but there are different associations, different stakeholders that we're figuring out how to move beyond meeting in person and to be able to utilize this Zoom format. So there's a lot of that, going on. We just met with representatives from the clergy on patrol. There are some clergy leadership round table discussions that are taking place, all Zoom, but we're staying connected and we're getting it done. So I expect, especially now, until we get over this latest surge, that's going to be the norm for a bit. But we're not going to let that stop us from talking to each other and getting information and ensuring that, you know, we have the most up-to-date information possible about the community issues that we're dealing with. So we're on Zoom, definitely.
Okay, great. Chief, this one's again directed right to you. How do you plan on updating the public as you progress through your 90-day plan?
Another good question. We're the questions, or in my mind, is what are some of the best formats that we could use to do that? So we've got our public relations area, our community affairs bureau that really helps us work in getting our message out. So I want to utilize that in a much bigger way. So between our Facebook and Twitter, we're going to be putting messages of that nature out. But also what's going in this format we're in now, but also at the end of the 90-day plan, I'm going to do a report that I present to the city council and mayor's office. So, you know, there'll be a report out there that the community will certainly have access to. So while that's going to happen, what I would prefer to do and what I'm doing now is to do updates as well. So people aren't waiting the full 90 days wondering what's going on. So, you know, we'll have periodic checks. So keep an eye out for our Twitter accounts, our Facebook accounts, and that'll be a way that we'll give you some brief snapshot updates as to what's going on.
Okay, here's another question. This is specifically about, oh, it just went away. Some of these questions coming in are paragraphs long.
Okay.
So this one is specifically about officers. It says, speaking with a bunch of friends that I have who work at RPD, I know this may be a hard time. Want to know how the officers are being supported with trauma-informed care.
So that's an excellent point. And I talked earlier about our alignment with the 6 pillars. One of those is officer wellness. Because here's the thing, if we're going to have a staff that's going to be able to get out there and be there for the community and to do their jobs in the best way possible, then they've got to be in a good place. So we're all united as a leadership staff when we talk about how we're going to support and help the officers. So, for example, we recently had a meeting for updates that we presented to the city council, and I mean they were great. They brought their questions. It was informative, and some of the things we talk about, I feel like it's my job to support the officers and have their backs and get them the resources that they need. So certainly on that end. We also had a meeting today, a training that was all about officer wellness. What are the things that we need to do to make sure that our people are, you know, they have the resources they need. They're able to come into work and do so in a good environment. I mean, those things are all important to us. I don't know if there are any of the staff that want to weigh in on that, but I can tell you that for us in our conversations, these are constants. We're having conversations about that. And actually, on another note on that, our plan was to get out and once, you know, I got the leadership positions filled and established, but the the executive deputy and I, we're going to go out and go to each roll call because we want to meet everybody. We want to hear their concerns firsthand. If they have any questions or pressing issues that they want to bring to our attention, we wanted to go in front of them and do that ourselves. But with this recent change in our processes due to the COVID reemergence, we have to rethink that. So, we're going to have to get creative. We may, in some ways where we can do Zoom, we may come and, come outside and talk to the officers as they're leaving a roll call. So we're not sure how we're going to format that, but know that we're going to have discussions with them and we want to hear from them firsthand on, what their needs are and how we can support them. The other thing I want to add is that something that's very, very important to me, and I know it's important to the leadership staff, the executive deputy chief, is that we want to involve the officers in a lot of discussions and issues that impact them. So, for example, we have the Raise Commission that's looking at issues that involve law enforcement. How can we make changes or improvements? And this is something that's come through the governor's office. Well, we've got a leadership group of officers that we've selected that they're going to be the ones that are come in and be involved and lead the discussions. It's a lot of this impacts them, and they've been on the front lines dealing with a lot of the issues that are being discussed. So who better to be a representative than those officers? So, we don't want to come in and speak for them. We want them to tell their story and be able to share with the commission and other groups what issues are really impacting them, so that this group and as well as the public has a full understanding of some of the issues that are going on, some of the things that they deal with out there. So we'll keep you posted on that, but know that I've told the officers when I came here that we want to involve them, we want to hear their voices, and that's something that's been ongoing. So I want to really commend my staff on that, and the meetings I've seen them hold to sit and discuss, who's been out there, who's a good, representative, who has good leadership skills, and will speak truth to power, so to speak. So those are the things we look for, and we try to make sure that we involve our officers in those discussions that impact them. But thanks for the question.
Okay, the next one is directed to the executive deputy chief. And it's asking you to talk about how you think your experience in Ferguson particularly is going to help move the Rochester community forward.
Well, first of all, I had an opportunity to see firsthand what a dysfunctional organization can look like, quite frankly, to be honest, and comparing that to where we are now and knowing that we have a jewel here in Rochester. So the experience that I had was really community engagement and learning how you can utilize community engagement to use an informed community policing process to address and offset civil unrest. And that's something that takes time. I believe that the experience I gleaned there was also the ability to work more closely with police officers and identifying those that had critical leadership skills that were not being utilized, that were not being heard. Those were the individuals that I found a place for them in the organization in order to help carve and make a change. And I'm already seeing that here. I'm already finding here that there are fantastic leaders as we go around. And I talk to them that have great ideas, have great leadership skills, and then getting them in the right place, doing the right things is part of the leadership that I bring, but it's something that the entire organization will benefit from. As I indicated in the beginning, we're building a bench of leaders that can cultivate change and move the organization forward.
Great, thanks. Shifting gears back to crime. This is a question about community cooperation in crime and the impact that police community relations plays in that. So the question is, what are some challenges that the police department has faced when trying to solve homicides or high-profile incidents like the mass shooting on Pennsylvania Avenue? If people come forward, how can you assure them they will be protected?
This is Chief Harrod. I'm going to weigh in a little bit, and then I invite the executive deputy chief or even the deputy chief persons to respond. It's a tough situation sometimes to be in. I can share with you that even from my experience when I first worked for the department, often this involved, relationships that I built. You develop a reputation for being somebody that people can come to, and the information is going to be handled delicately. And I don't see where that's changed. And sometimes it's a little bit more than that. For whatever reason, that person is a little more comfortable with a certain other officer. So even now, I get calls with confidential information, people that want to share things and they want to see that it gets to the right place because they trust me. And you know what? That's okay. And some of the other officers I work with, they're the ones that get the call. But at the end of the day, what matters is that you call who you're comfortable with, and we will make sure that the information gets to where it needs to be. A big part of those reasons is that this person knows that particular person or law enforcement officer, and or they know someone who knows that officer and who can convince them that I trust that person. I've dealt with them before and it's going to be okay. That's what it boils down to. And so when we revert back again, we talk about those relationships. This is what it comes back to, is relationships, trust. And we talked about trust and legitimacy. Those are how you are able to solve problems and solve crimes and incidents like this, is that people have built relationships and there's a trust that's been built. And so you utilize that. And that's what moves the process forward. ED, do you want to weigh in at all?
Chief, I think DCO persons could probably weigh in on this one probably a lot better than I could.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. So I think one of the biggest things is to the chief's mission when we're talking about our plans and what we're developing is, again, working with our partners. Well, our partners are also the community members. And as the chief said, we know there are people in the community that have information, and it's going to be treated with the utmost regard and sensitivity when that happens. We know that there's residents out there that experience, and we're acknowledging the fact that when they have these crimes occur in their neighborhoods, they want to help. They want to be there, and they want to actually help the police and work in bettering their neighborhoods. So again, the chief is 100% on par with the information that's being shared, and that understanding our major crimes units, our patrol section investigators, the ones that are delving into the meat and potatoes of our investigations, do a phenomenal job of treating residents that want to come forward and share information with the utmost respect and confidentiality. But it's going to take, like our plans, how we keep reiterating, it's going to take the community. It takes a village to get in front of what the challenges we're facing.
Hey, Chief, if I might add one piece real real quick. I think DCO person is being very modest. I had some conversations with him. He grew up in this community. He understands what it's like to be in this community. He was in the neighborhood. He knows how important it is. I've talked to him about how important it is for people to talk, important for us to grab those relationships, and how he feels about making a difference here. And I know he perhaps didn't feel comfortable saying that, but I'm pleased to have someone of his caliber on the team that can bring that type of leadership and caring to our organization.
That's
actually,
excellent. Thank you.
oh, sorry.
No, I was just reiterating, that's an excellent point to make. Thank you.
So that's actually a really good segue into our next question, but I just want to let the viewers at home know we probably have time for 2 more questions. So if you've got anything that's kind of burning on the tip of your tongue, it's time to get it in the chat right now. But to that point that you just mentioned about the DCO growing up in the community and being representative of the community, there's been a couple questions that have come in related to RPD's perceived struggle to recruit people that are representative of our community. And one of the viewers is asking, what efforts are in place to increase the number of diverse candidates that we hire for the police department?
I will mention a little bit about that, and then I'd invite our Deputy Chief Shaw to weigh on in that as well, because the recruitment and our staffing falls under his bureau. I do remember even from my early time in the department, that's it's always been a little bit of a struggle. It's not. And first of all, other departments deal with this issue as well. It's not just in Rochester, but there are different reasons for that. And some of those involve us being under a consent decree, which to a certain extent guides our hiring numbers. But we also are pretty committed and believe that we have to have a department that reflects the community. It's just smart business on so many levels, so that we work behind the scenes to work with other organizations. We talk about our partnerships with other stakeholders that help us in our recruitment efforts. I do also recall I've sat on for a little while, I sat on a national committee with the Department of Homeland Security that discussed, issues of concern to state and local police departments. And so these are some of the things we would discuss. So that's how I know firsthand that this is an issue for departments around the country, because, there are so many requirements. You want a qualified police officer, and by the time they've gone through the academy, you want someone of a certain ethical standard. And while it was tough even for me coming through the academy, I felt pretty good coming through that process, knowing that I met a certain level of requirements and training, and I was ready to go. So I do want to give Deputy Chief Shaw a minute to talk a little bit about it, because this is something that he works with on a larger scale, more so than I. We're all there to assist him, but you want to weigh in at all, Deputy Chief?
Yeah, so Officer Rivera and Calderon from the recruitment unit, they've done an excellent job recruiting candidates for upcoming exams. Some of the things that they've done to improve the number of minorities taking the exam and getting hired is one is called the program called PREP, which is the Police Recruitment Education Program, which is a program working with MCC and encourages students to take criminal justice classes and then connect them with our recruitment officers to prepare them with taking the exam. Some of the schools have also set up programs that involve the fire department, the AMR, ambulance service, and the police department. And Officer Rivera has actually taught these classes for people that have been interested in the policing aspect of it, and many of those have been minority students. The professional standards section also does prep workshops for studying for the exam and taking the physical agility test, and about 50% of those attending are minority candidates. So we try to help them along with prepping for the test and getting through it and passing it, and then also the other steps that go along with it, which is part of the physical agility test. And with that being said, we process the entire minority list each year for the candidates that do take the exam. So, we do our best to make the department diverse and hire the minorities.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah.
So the last question of the night kind of also deals with recruitment, I guess. It is, how are the staffing levels in the department? I've heard retirements are up this year. Is it having an impact on calls for service response time?
I'm going to keep my comments short, and I'm going to let the Deputy Chief Shaw weigh in on that. I try to stay in my lane. This is an area he's been working on for a bit. So, Deputy Chief, do you want to respond to that? Thank you.
Yeah, Nick, can you just repeat that one more time?
Oh, now you're pushing it. It says, essentially, how are the staffing levels in the department? I've heard that retirements are up. How is this having an effect on patrol calls for service response time?
So we closely monitor the staffing levels. With officers that have been out injured or sick, that affects our people that are actually on the road a little bit, especially with the COVID spike. We've had some officers involved with that, but we try to monitor the best we can.
Okay, thanks. Well, that concludes the question and answer portion of tonight's meeting. I want to just take a minute to thank the chief, her command staff, Councilman Lightfoot, for their time and the community, in particular for their thoughtful questions. This is a reminder, this presentation material and a link to tonight's video will be available on the city's website at www.cityofrochester.gov/virtual community update. Thank you all and have a good night.
Thank you. Thanks for your help, Mr.